Alright, hello again. This is Trent and I was working on the top 100 challenge. This time we had a game with the Morra gambit and I unfortunately lost this one too. And it took about 28 points or 23 points out of my rating. So I was going to analyze this game and see what happened in it, see where I went wrong. So e4, c5, d4. This is the Morra gambit with c3. There are a lot of players who prefer to avoid it with a move like knight f6 or d5. D5 is the typical move I play against the Alapin, but I get an inferior variation of it after something like c takes, oh sorry, not c takes, but e takes, queen takes, and now c takes d4. So in this case, the c pawn was exchanged much earlier, and white has an easy option of something like knight c3. So this is an inferior version of the Alapin if you play d5 against it. So that's why knight f6 would be the preferred way to avoid the Morra gambit. And then you just easily transpose to a very common line like this. Well, if it takes back, then something like d6, knight c6, and just simple moves. And that just avoids all the complications. So I took the challenge, I accepted the gambit. Knight c3, knight c6, knight f3. e6 is another interesting move that I could look into, but the move I've been playing lately is d6. e6 might be interesting, it might be an easier defense, but I play d6, bishop c4, and now a6. So a6 is an important move here. It's because if knight f6, then this is premature because you leave the b5 square weak, so e5 takes, knight takes, and knight b5. And now c7 is weak, and it's very awkward for black to defend this. In fact, white might already be winning. So a6 is important for that reason. And I was surprised that my opponent played bishop g5. This is not the most common move. The most common move is castles, and after that I do play knight f6. And then the theory goes on with moves like bishop f4, bishop g4, at some point queen e2 or h3. So, and this time e5 is no good for white because this time knight b5 is prevented by a6. So e5 is no good in this case. Bishop g5. This was a new move to me, so I reacted to it with h6, which is apparently losing for black. The best move, according to the engines and the grandmasters, is knight f6. And then you get a position like this, where black is going to put a pawn bunch in the center with something like e6, or in some lines you could get the bishop out with bishop g4, that's also common. Or you can just play rook g8, king h1, e6, and then try to use the open G line against the white king, and then you just develop your pieces normally on this wing, maybe something like b5, bishop b7, bishop e7, and then put the knight somewhere, maybe rook c8. So black's setup here isn't too bad, although the black king is in the center. You do have a lot of pawns here, and it's not so easy to crack through that. Okay, and if instead of takes he does something like castles, black is pretty fine after something like this. It's pretty normal, kind of like the Sicilian Najdorf setup with bishop g5. It reminds me of that a little bit. Black is just going to play bishop b7, rook c8, and have a pretty normal game. This is a typical Sicilian setup. Except now he's up a pawn. Now he's up a pawn. So h6, bishop h4 is a mistake. He needed to play queen b3, which both of us overlooked this move. And the point is that this bishop hanging is irrelevant because after takes he has an easy attack against my king. I'm already up king d7, this knight falls. White regains the material and he has easy attacks against my king with stuff like this. So white is definitely winning. Black has to do something like bishop e6. And now this pawn can drop off at any second. So b5, rook ac1. Black has to do something like king f7 to hold on to the pawn if he wants. And he will now have a very hard time deploying this bishop because all these pawns are in the way. It can't get to e7. He'd have to do something like push g5 and then bishop g7. So the black king is going to be in a shaky spot for the rest of the game, and this is going to be very uncomfortable. Apparently white is winning. We both missed that opportunity. He played bishop h4, I answered g5. This is okay. Bishop g3, bishop g7, castles, and then I played knight f6. Not a bad move, but an alternative is bishop g4. And then a line can go like this. Knight f6 to attack the bishop. We trade some pieces. And then black starts getting active. And protect the pawn. So this is a more active way of playing, you could say. It's about equally strong with knight f6, maybe slightly stronger. So knight f6 isn't bad, but this is an interesting alternative. Black gets a pretty active position. And I can just prepare something like castles and then bring another rook to the d file. In the game it was knight f6. He played e5. Takes, takes, knight takes d8. This is a typical maneuver. Knight takes e5. And here, a typical way to defend against it is e6, but here it's unnecessary because the knight already defends that anyway, and it doesn't need to be freed for the moment. Right now, white has a couple of really powerful pieces, like these two pieces, and black just really needs to challenge these pieces immediately. So there's two decent ways of doing that. One is bishop e6, rook c8. So you just immediately get rid of that bishop. And then in the future you can challenge this knight somehow, maybe knight d7. And then black will be okay because now he's not under so much pressure. Alternatively, you could play knight d7, swap off this knight immediately, and then play rook c8 and attack the bishop. And now in the future you can play e6 to try to kick that knight away. Or maybe b5 to kick the bishop away if needed. So it's important for black to just immediately challenge these two pieces because they're very active. e6 isn't really necessary, it's a common defense against this setup, but here black has a more active plan. This is slow. So I played b5, and this creates a lot of weaknesses because in a lot of lines this rook is going to be coming down to this file, and it's pretty tough for black to challenge that in some ways. But here, even more concretely, Stockfish has a direct refutation to this. So better knight d7 trying to challenge these pieces again. And then f5, and black is slightly better. So they're just kicking out all the white pieces. So I went for b5. My opponent played bishop b3. And Stockfish says knight takes b5 is the best because after takes, takes, king e7. Knight c6 check. The problem is that white nearly weaves a checkmating net. So this rook here, and then this bishop's going to cut you off here. So this is nearly checkmate. Black has to play knight e4, give up the piece, and then rook a6, and black can apparently hold a draw in this kind of endgame. So black would have to figure all that out after the knight sacrifice. Bishop b3, he missed the opportunity. So bishop b7, rook fe1, I castles, f4. And here, Stockfish wants to play a mysterious looking move rook e8, and I looked at this at first and it didn't make a lot of sense to me. It's just, what exactly is the rook doing? So I analyzed this and it looks like this is a prophylactic move against knight d7, so this move doesn't come with tempo anymore. So, for example, f takes, h4, knight h5. Here, when white plays something like knight d7, this rook on f8 is no longer being attacked. So I can just ignore this knight and continue attacking with knight takes g2. In the game I played knight h5 immediately. Stockfish doesn't like this move because knight d7, this time it comes with tempo. So I play rook e8, f5, and white is trying to, white uses this extra tempo on the rook to develop an initiative. But still black is better because I still have the extra pawn. but I allowed some unnecessary activity because I could have prevented knight d7 from coming with tempo. So I get rid of the knight, I get rid of the bishop, that was my plan. I play bishop c6 to challenge this. He attacks me here. Here it still says black is nearly winning or already winning. So I play rook c8, this is a good move. Okay, and instead of bishop d5, the computer says knight e4 was better. Looking for something like knight f6 check, and that's going to fork the king and the rook. So knight e4 was definitely a better move. Bishop d5. I just answer rook c8, keep everything protected. fe6. Bishop c6, knight takes c6, and I'm okay. Nothing scary there. So f takes, knight takes, bishop takes, rook takes. Yeah, black is winning by this point, but I didn't manage to convert. So he plays knight d5. He's threatening knight f6 check, trying to kill the king and the rook. So I answer king h8. That's the best move. Knight f6. Here I played bishop takes f6 immediately to try to trade off some pieces. Apparently better is to keep the knight on because after this, these knights are in an awkward position because I already have pressure on this knight, so this knight can't go anywhere without this knight dying. So he has to play something like rook f1. And I can give up this bishop at any time I want. I don't have to give it up immediately. So for example, rook f1, instead of giving up the bishop, I can play knight f8 and just try to trade off this piece for this piece. And here black continues to trade. And here apparently black's endgame is winning. It's because black can easily create connected pass pawns on the outside, meanwhile white has doubled pawns. So in an endgame, this makes it very difficult to move these pawns more efficiently to queen. Meanwhile, black has the bishop versus the knight, so the bishop works better on both sides of the board, and that can support the two connected pass pawns. So this is a strategically winning endgame that black could have ended up with. Instead, I played bishop takes f6. Knight takes f6, rook d8. So I tried to trade off pieces again, but this is a pretty fatal mistake. So again, the computer wants to go rook to c8 and then prepare something like rook c2 or rook d1. It's just keeping a rook on the back row, otherwise he's going to get checks back here, and these checks are what ultimately are my downfall. So rook d8, rook e8 check. He's attacking my knight, I counterattack his knight. And then you can see here, it allows a checkmate. He could, if he wants to, he can play rook g8 and knight f6 checkmate, and yeah. This is what I overlooked, is that this is how you can checkmate it with a rook and knight because this pawn's in the way. Otherwise I could have gotten out of that if that pawn wasn't there. So instead of knight e6, rook d6 was necessary to keep the knight protected and control the f6 square. And at the minimum, this is going to be a draw, because white can never deliver checkmate with knight f6. So g3, rook c2, and then I fall for the mate. So kind of a disappointing game where I was better for pretty much the entire game, since I was up the pawn and I was defending pretty well for the most part. But ultimately I didn't manage to convert the extra pawn. And there were a couple of unnecessary moves along the way. Okay, and against this new line with bishop g5 that I didn't see before. So there's a couple of things I'm doing about this. First of all, I'm practicing a lot more games against the computer, so I've been playing a lot of games with the Caro-Kann as well. It's just, I think it's an interesting system for black. It's much less sharp, so maybe black has a more intuitive setup with bishop f5 and then just get all your pieces on good squares. No bad pieces. So I've been practicing a lot of games like this against the computer because it's a more intuitive line and it just makes more sense to me intuitively. Of course, I could practice games with the Sicilian still against the computer. I'll practice some games with white as well, with maybe e4 and d4. So I've been practicing a lot of games against Stockfish, and maybe that'll iron out a lot of my opening mistakes so that I don't, well, make as many of those in these games. Um, Aside from that, yeah, during this game, I woke up pretty early in this morning because I had to work at 9 a.m., but then I woke up really early and couldn't get back to sleep, and I had some brain fog. So I have a couple of things I'm doing about this. First of all, taking some vitamins, and I think the vitamins help with my brain fog, and then I combine that with some push-ups, and that gets my blood pumping so I can think a little bit more clearly. So I don't really want to be doing any chess games until I at least have some vitamins, have my blood pumping, maybe have some kind of fruit smoothie or eat something that helps my brain start, well, working faster. So maybe the brain fog influenced, maybe it didn't. So in any case, I want to perform at my best, and that's a couple of things I'm going to be doing. I did have some brain fog during this game, and that's how I hope to get rid of some of it. And I'll keep practicing. I'm practicing in a variety of openings. I'm also studying a book on an endgame encyclopedia. I need to look at some rook endgames as well because, well, there's a lot there that I haven't studied yet, and some of the rook games get pretty complicated. So I need to know how to hold a draw, like what are the fortresses in a lot of places. And it's because some of my losses with black is when I'm defending for a long time, but then ultimately I snap. So if I understand maybe, well, more endgame fortresses, then that helps to show you what resources you have for defending. So for example, sacrificing a pawn to reach an opposite colored bishop endgame, that's one fortress you can go for. Maybe there's other fortresses I can find if I keep studying some endgame encyclopedias, it'll make me a stronger defender. So I'll be working on some rook endgames, I'll be practicing against the computer, and while I'm at it, I'll keep showing you some games that I play online against these people, and I'll study the results of the game, see how I can improve, and hopefully I'll get to the top 100. But for now, we have 2 losses to start off with, and it's going to be a pretty intense climb. There's going to be a lot of strong opponents, and they're going to throw a lot of different things at me. I have to be ready for anything, and it's very easy to go wrong when you're trying to go for top 100. So I'll keep practicing, and maybe one day I'll get to that top. So I'll see you then. I'll keep fighting, and hopefully I continue improving, and I hope I help you improve too by making these videos. So thank you and have a nice day.